Hello. This is Peter Palmiotti, and this is the latest episode of Comics and Art, episode 24. How is everybody doing?
Hi, everyone.
So today, yes, today with me is Michael Maxwell. So Hing, is that anything specifically, or
My
just
real name
your?
is actually My real name's actually Hing. That's my name is Michael Hing. So yeah, I think I must have Michael Maxwell as my on the Discord. So maybe I should change that just to avoid confusion.
Yeah, because everybody has multiple names nowadays. It's hard to keep track.
Yeah, it's all emails and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, um, but yeah, my name's Michael Hing on pretty much all social media. Not to be confused with an Australian comedian. Because that's the thing. If you Google that name, that's what comes up. Is this Australian Chinese guy? So yeah, yeah. But I'm not the same person. I'm not Australian. So yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself. So, for those that are watching, don't know you at all, what
Okay.
are you
Yeah. A
up
lot of you probably won't. Yeah. A lot of you
to?
probably won't know me. I'm not on many streams yet. I've only done Carry On Streaming, which is a UK comics group. You can find us on Comicbook's channel. Usually, I think the last one was done through Charlie's London, though. So Comicbook has recently done the story of North Korea, Best Korea, Kim Il Sung, the Adventures. That's it. The Adventures of Kim Il Sung and Best Korea. That's worth getting because it's just a good laugh. And Charlie's currently doing a mailing list for her Charlie Chaplin book, which I think she's just going together now. She's sorting out a mailing list at the moment. I think that's as far as I know. I don't know the links, I'm afraid, but I'm sure you'll find them they're both on Indiegogo, so just have a look there and you'll find them. I myself have been self-printing stuff for a couple of years. I've done a couple of zines called Exuviate, which are basically art zines, very limited numbers. Neither have any copies left because basically one was done about 2-3 years ago now, I think, and barely sold any, and I got rid of the rest because of they were just taking up space. But I sold about 10 or 20 of those. Did a second edition a few months ago. I've just released another mini comic by the name of Troubleshooter. It's sort of a pilot for what I'm working on for my crowd fund, but that's I've still got copies of that available from me now. At least about 10, I think. So yep, that's basically a short cyberpunk story. Nothing like epic or anything like that. Just a little short incident that introduces you to the world. Things might change over time, like the character designs a little bit because it's a pilot, just as TV pilots change. So I do these ones, not video game. So I do comic book ones, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm currently working on the first proper edition of Troubleshooter, which again is basically a cyberpunk story, telling the story of a drug dealer who's working for the Triads, but ultimately has his own troubles at home. But we follow him through the city streets of London, trying to make deliveries while also being pursued by the local police. And it basically leads to something a bit more of a tangled web. It's not, again, going to be a huge story, maybe no more than 50 pages, but it just introduces you to the world. And and we'll see if it takes off, if anyone likes it, basically, which they should do because, it's a debut story from me. I'm just getting started. And it's the first story that I've done that's probably more than 10 pages long. So if nothing else, it's going to be interesting, and I hope you enjoy it as well if you do want to back it when it comes out.
Cool. Yeah, I got a lot of little things, projects I started, and eventually we'll get back to.
Mm.
And one of them is sort of a cyberpunk story. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I love this genre. Um, Big fan of William Gibson. I don't know if you know his work.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. No, I've only read Neuromancer and Burning Chrome, but I love them both. Burning Chrome is easier to take in because honestly, with Neuromancer, it's hard to follow. It's actually not an easy book to read because you kind of have the. I think a lot of people back in the day they kind of got at cyberpunk saying, "Oh, it's just style over substance." No, it's actually quite a bit more complicated than that. I mean, I think people think of it when they see the imagery for it, but actually, it can get quite confusing and is no less valuable than any other science fiction novel. But just as cyberpunk may have once been dismissed by of the science fiction community, that science fiction is usually dismissed by the majority of the world. So maybe a niche within a niche, but I think it's going to become. It looks like it's going to become cool again soon because of that video game that's coming out. So it'll probably
Yeah.
become the next big thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've been seeing a little more cyberpunk pop up lately, so definitely.
Yeah, take advantage of the situation for the time being. I think try and make something of it. Although I'm a little bit contrarian, so what will probably happen is I'll probably decide, right then, I'm going to do my Dark Age story now because I've got an idea for that. So but yeah, And hi, Russ. By the way, I've just seen you in the chat.
Hey, Russ. Welcome.
It's afternoon for us, so good afternoon, Russ. Yeah. But yeah.
So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I didn't really have anything to say. I was just going to try and fill up the air.
Oh, don't feel like you got to do that. I'm working, so I pause a lot, but
yeah.
So I sort of came up with a title for the episode, and sometimes I actually go off the title as a theme. So we can talk a little bit about that, which is, if you haven't already read, The Art of a Comic Page. I've said previously many a times that like comic book artists, especially those doing it for years and years, are like some of the world's most fantastic artists out there, because they gotta essentially be able to draw everything, style aside, everything from people to buildings to cars to water animals to like everything and anything. And I was just thinking about this the other day. It's like typical sort of Marvel DC comic where you got a whole crew of multiple people working on a book. You got a penciler, you got an anchor, you got a colorist, you got a letterer. It's like at every stage in the process is almost a different piece of work, and it's the evolution from start to completion that really changes it and gives it more and more dimension. It's like you want everybody great who's on the team. Some are more skilled than others, but with penciling to inking, it's further definition of the artwork. Sometimes the inker is heavier. Sometimes they just follow what's there in the pencils. But definitely with computer coloring, and even lettering is done a lot by computer nowadays too. It really can change the look of a page drastically.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I mean, I've realised that for budget reasons, if I colour this in, I'm probably going to have to do that on a tablet now because honestly, I'd sooner do it by hand. I just feel I'd like to see it more organic, but we work with what we have, really. I think as well, so I've got to be a bit more improv really with this. I was thinking of doing it in black and white, but a lot of people say no, it's more attractive in color. So I think basically I'm going to have to just go with what I've got, and because I did think of coloring pencils, but the problem is, again, it's a skill in itself that you have to learn, and well, obviously digital as well, but digital you can kind of get fairly even colors very quickly, and it's far easier to work on a budget, whereas because there's plenty of free drawing and coloring programs anyway online. So I figured
Right.
just it's a tenner for a digital pen. I could probably pull it off okay. As I said, I'd sooner do it with Copic or Pro markers, but that's not an option at the minute. So, and it's funny, I was watching an episode of I don't know if you're familiar with the Draftsman show that Proco puts up, but
Right. Yeah.
yeah, and you were saying that it's not a bad thing to actually just make the most of your limitations. You just use what you have and then make the best of what you have, and actually you can end up with something quite good. He's even using the example of an artist who used the most basic drawing tools available, which were probably expensive back in the day, but these days will probably be a tablet that was only worth about £50. But he said this artist was still using it because he said that's what he was used to, even though it's much better out there now. So if there's tools out there which are much better, then it doesn't matter if you're able to pull it off well enough with what you have. So I'm kind of looking to rely on this, but I will obviously use what I have to just produce the best thing that I can. But at the end of the day, it's the thing of all you need to make a comic book is a pen, paper, and probably a photocopier, and you can still put it out there. So that's what
Yeah.
I've been relying on for the last few years.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, this seems to be a wider range of tools available, and yeah, when it comes down to it, it's just put an image on a piece of paper or a digital, page or whatever, and tell a story is essentially what a comic is. Words and pictures, whatever gets you there. I'm a traditionalist, and I dabble in digital stuff now and then. I did pick up a tablet, but I'm forcing myself not to get into it because I'm way too busy otherwise. It's like it's a learning curve, and it's like I don't need to be distracted right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, I'd sooner do it all by hand. I mean, I quite like the idea, for example, of say doing something set in the future, but using very old materials to produce it. So or more organic materials. Like, can you look at the Ghost in the Shell stuff that was done by Masamune when he doesn't color all the pages, but the ones he does, it looks like he's working in watercolor. It looks great, and I quite like that it looks like it in a way. It kind of you got all this really futuristic tech, but it's contrasted with a very old material that he's still using, and it's far more interesting in a way looking at that than it is by looking at some digital painting. I think there's a lot of digital painting can sometimes lose that kind of even though it's obviously done by people and obviously a lot of it does look really good, it can lose that kind of touch, like the individual brush strokes you might get or pen strokes or even the way the ink's laid down. I mean, I think it's becoming better at replicating reality now, but I'm not sure if it'll ever be quite the same.
Yeah, there's something about traditional where it's so open to accidental. Like it's like especially like with watercolor or like you could just build on it and water it down and it really just takes on a life of its own. I love watercolor. I played with it to a small extent, but it's definitely something I'm interested in taking up.
I mean, I would happily take the time to sit down and learn it, quite frankly. But at the same time, it's kind of the thing of how long do you want to spend on one book? You got to spend the time just like learning, mastering the material, always getting competent with the material. Then you got to put it on a book, and then you got, it's all these kind of complicated things that at the moment it's kind of, there is a movement, it seems, of people self-producing work online. And yeah, I've made this point before that in other chats to other people, that yes, it'd be nice to wait until I'm really much better at what I am doing and feel much happier with my work. But will that day ever come? That's one thing. And it seems to me the time right now is now, frankly. It could be, you could wait a few years till you're much better, but by then things may have moved on a little bit. Although, yes, people will always be producing work. This seems to be a really good time to produce work.
Yeah, it's like I collected independent books all my life, and part of the charm is those very first issues that are not so polished, not so professional looking. See the rawness of the artwork, and what the artist, you can tell what the artist is trying to do, and where the shortcomings are, and that doesn't bother me. It's like that, I love that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I think I do wonder, should I just say, oh, never mind, I'll just do it in black and white. I just hear you get more sales in colour, so maybe, yeah, as Russ says, do it now. Well, yes, actually, because you get all these people, I encounter them sometimes, they want to start off with their magnum opus, and it's just, that's not going to happen. First of all, you haven't learned anything yet. You don't really know what you're doing. You're still kind of building yourself up to that point. You need to do the shorter stuff first, really. I mean, even now, I feel like aiming for 50 pages may be a bit epic for what I want to do right now. But it's going to be probably broken up in two parts, 25 and 25. But to me, it's still one story. So, it's 50 pages at the end of the day.
Right.
And I think, although I have done a few shorter stories, so I like to think I've kind of refined things a little bit, enough to maybe try and tackle something a bit longer. And then probably after this, I'll do a bunch of short stories again. But I think a lot of people, when they start out, it's kind of like, yeah, I've got this really big idea, and I've said this on another stream, or was it a stream, or was it maybe just a private chat with someone? I can't remember now. But I said, yeah, but the thing is, you have this idea, but why should I care? As in, I'm not being mean, but as in, I don't know who you are. You've got no previous output. You want me to invest a load of money into something that I've never really heard of before. I've never seen any of your previous work, particularly. I don't know how you are as doing narrative, and you don't really have an audience. So you may have this book you want published, but it doesn't matter who picks it up. If you've not got an audience, no one's going to buy it.
Yeah, totally.
And that's kind of how, that's the thing. I mean, look at Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. What was that? That was just a fanzine, pretty much.
Yep.
Build it up beforehand. I don't think it's a bad thing to do at all. And maybe, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like I'm aware of those early issues. I didn't, I wasn't aware of them at the time, but you could see the rawness in that work, and definitely like a number of inspirations that they had, and they were just going for it. They were just like, this is silly fun, and clearly you could see our inspirations. We don't care.
I think as well, a lot of people, it's worth the remembering too. I think they've seen once it's done, it's done. There's no reason why you can't have an idea and pick it up again down the line in a few years. That's what a lot of filmmakers have done. So, I mean, it used to be on YouTube, but there's a film called, I don't think it is anymore, but it's called LA Takedown. It was an early film by Michael Mann made in the late 80s. He did it again as Heat. So he became better at his craft. Yeah, so it's basically the same story, and he came back to it. Now, I see no reason why you can't do that with your comic. Even Spawn, actually, that started off like that. So Spawn was basically set in space, I think, at first. So I don't think he ever printed it. It's a similar story, but he kind of came back with it to it, you know. So he wrote it. It was lying in his portfolio for a while, and then Image happened, pulled it out, and started again. Youngblood, I think, is another one that started off as something else. Because wasn't it going to be as an X-Workman versus something like that? Exterminators or something like that, and then he couldn't do it. But that was going to be started as something. He had Youngblood sitting around. I think Youngblood was going to be released through Malibu for a bit, and I think I was around for about 2 years before he came back to it. So there are examples of people who come back. You know, you can, but even if you have it printed, just say, "Yeah, I'm remaking it."
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, it's like your sort of journey as a writer, artist, creator. You know, you can only get somewhere if you go somewhere. You know, if you actually put something down on paper and say, this is a good idea, but there's parts of it that are excellent. There's parts of it that I could throw out. You know, let me reinvent this a little bit and take it to a better place. You know,
well, stuff I've got that probably will just be in short stories, but again, we'll see down the line. You know, who knows? But I think, well, why don't I just put these in one universe? You know, I've got all these short bits and pieces that I've done here and there, so I can combine it and put it in one place. And it comes back.
Yeah.
I mean, I do actually quite like the European model of doing things as well. I think that's pretty cool. Rather than just pressuring yourself to do, say, something every single month, all the time. They just put out a single album of about 60 pages, and you got the full story in one go.
Yeah. No, yeah, I definitely like that. Like, I was a big fan of Rich Corbin from back in Heavy Metal magazine, and he seemed to do, like, you know, sort of a kind of graphic novel every year. You know, they would serialize it or whatever in the magazine, but you know, they collect it too, and I thought that was genius. You know, it's like I love all formats. You know, it's like I love the experimental formats and whatnot, but you know, like back when graphic novels were actually graphic novels and not just reprints of regular comics or something. You know, it was you know, really cool. Like they had more pages to explore a story and just really go wild with the artwork sometimes, and, you know, open it up, exactly. Sort of.
Yeah, I think the Europeans, though, it's kind of like, well, this is being produced as a book anyway. We're going to really put ourselves out for it. Like Blueberry or Valerian have that kind of vibe to them, don't they? Or the Incal, that was always meant to be a book. And I suppose, but a lot of the early European stuff, it was Metal Hurlant. They produced it instead in shorter segments. And then it got collected together again. But some of the art in that's stunning too. But I think, Mobius actually was obviously one of the contributors. You know, he did Arzak and all that kind of stuff. And there's a website, Open Culture, which has his top 18 tips for aspiring artists, and one of the big things is start off with small short stories, then build yourself up to the big one, basically. So, you know, you're kind of an untested artist, which is exactly my point. I'm kind of always breaking my own rule, actually, of what I'm working on at the minute, but, you know, I just want to put the story out there because there's two characters in it. They've actually basically a husband and wife, pretty much, actually, but they've existed longer than anything else in it. You know, there's been variations on this thing over and over since it's probably about 12. You know, started off by pretty much wanted to rip off some of the video games I liked back then, but then when I was about 14, I saw Heat, and I thought, oh, actually, I can create something with characters which you actually care about, which are not just some invincible action hero or whatever who may just have this woman in the background, possibly like a Schwarzenegger movie where, you know, there's no real kind of tension or connection apart from maybe True Lies. But actually, these people can actually have a life beyond the gunfights and the heists or the espionage or whatever you want to call it. There, you can create this thing with people in it. So I'm really doing this as an outlet, really. That these characters, at least, even if I do nothing else with them, at least they exist now. They're in the world. So but I may extend their story one day.
Yeah, it's like I have an idea or something I may tackle this year. We'll see. But it's like I want to do short form, but maybe just like take it to long form. So like a horror, kind of a horror story ish, that will be maybe like 8-page stories, but it will just be ongoing.
Okay.
So a kind of a comic book serial.
That's a bit like that's a similar kind of. That reminds me of the format you actually got and stuff like Metal Alert and or Heavy Metal and 2000 AD did that, didn't they? It's kind of this thing of a serialized thing, but as well. So with characters that existed for a long time, Savage Dragon that apparently existed for a long time, and Eric Larson said before he even got it published. So there's all these kind of things you can always come back to, and I think a lot of people, I suppose, I'm just starting out, but you figure this. I'm about in my early 30s, so you start reading about things, or you start finding out about things. So I always regret not doing more in my 20s. Just basically not worrying about it and just saying, look, I'm going to do this 10-copy comic book and hope that some local store carries it or whatever. I'll just hand it to my friends. My mates can have it. There you go. I've told a story and then hone my craft that way. I'd say that actually, no idea if we're going to have any teenage listeners or not, but that wouldn't be a bad idea for many of you. In fact, are you familiar with Ewan on the Discord? So on the Donkey Jaw Discord, he pops up.
Ewing?
Ewan. So Ewan 32-bit, I think he calls himself.
I don't think so. I think that's new to me.
He's only he was once in one of Marsh's chats, and I think he followed me on Instagram because I think I talked to him on there. I didn't realize how young he is. He's only about 12 or 13. Okay. And he's already getting started. He's already got a store. He's already got a store on Etsy going. So that's great for him. Actually, yeah, I know. I was really impressed with that. Frankly, it's really good that he's doing that.
I'll just mention really quick, if anybody's watching and doesn't know, Marshall Lee, who I'm doing a couple projects with, has a Discord, AAA creators. And, there's a bunch of different circles of people in that group, and it's amazing. And that's what you're referring to.
Yeah. But Ewan does have an Instagram, but I think he's on it as Ewan 32-bit on there, but I'm not sure. But he's around anyway, and he's already getting started now, which is great. I just hope he doesn't get disheartened at any point or anything like that.
He could be the next, what was that popular comic? Something cop, I forget now. There was like a young kid and his older brother, were working on a comic together. It became really hot for a time.
Oh, wow, okay. Because I know that Viz, I don't know if you, not Viz Media, the one that republishes the manga stuff, but Viz,
right?
Basically, as in it's basically a comic series that started in the late 70s or early 80s, and it was in the UK, and they wrote it basically to make fun of people they used to know around Newcastle. So it's sort of and that just started in their attic, and then it became a big deal over here. It was really, I don't think it's, from what I know, it's not as funny as it was. It's the early stuff that's really classic, but it just basically gets us a lot of English stereotypes, effectively, of the day within the UK. Yeah, there we go. As Russ says, extreme adult Beano. That pretty much sums it up. It pretty much involves the Beano for grown-ups, effectively, but a lot more crass. And that was just started in the attic, in someone's attic. I think when they did it, they're only about 17 or 18 when they put it together. And there's one. I went to some comic fair in London, East London, about 4 years ago now, and there was someone there who's only about 11, who was already selling his first stuff too. You kind of almost get a slight inferiority complex when faced with these kind of people. It's like, what was stopping me from doing that? Even just, but it's amazing how many people started off this way. Apparently, I didn't know this either. Apparently, even Clive Barker started off doing like self-published small comics he just gave around in his art college, if I remember right. I read that recently. Terry Gilliam's another one who started off a similar way. So there's quite a few of these people. Matt Groening as well. So all these people, these first kind of creative endeavors are basically in comics. So you don't have to actually even have the medium define your career if you want to go further with it. I mean, it's fine. Obviously, it's great if you make a career of it, but if you kind of like really want to be a filmmaker, well, actually, it's quite a good medium to craft that too, because you can start thinking about how you can construct shots. You start understanding how you design stuff too, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the same medium, but it's there's a lot of similarities, and if it's like storyboarding to a certain extent.
Well, I think a lot of storyboard artists are actually comics artists as well.
Yeah.
Because that last Mad Max film,
churn out.
Yeah.
You got to churn out some quick images that make sense.
Well, I mean, that Dune film that Jodorowsky was going to do that fell through, that was entirely storyboarded. They had a script, but basically he dictated to Mobius how he wanted it to look. So the entire film kind of exists as a storyboard, but the annoying thing is you can't see it. There's only about 4 of those books produced, but that film kind of exists. And I still want to see it. I still want to read it, but all I see is the odd bit they decide to show you here and there. But that's an example of a comics artist who does storyboarding. Or the last Mad Max movie, Fury Road, that was entirely done by comics artists. They didn't even write a script for that. They had to write one out eventually because to show all the money men and all that kind of thing. But it was actually written initially, effectively as a comic strip or as storyboard art. That's how it was written. It's just because they realized that it was important as a visual film. So they had to think of it visually. So they had to visualize it and put it out.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think that if you want that ambition, if you have that ambition, I mean, Ridley Scott, he's another one. He's actually a really good graphic artist. And he basically, if you think about it, even Ridley Scott's kind of produced a comic book, storyboarded Blade Runner and Alien. So that's, a comic story. So he's Dan O'Bannon is another one. He's actually a very competent artist apparently as well. So, there's all these people who learn from sequential art effectively, even if they've necessarily. So, yeah. Incidentally, sorry.
Russ comments, storyboarding pays much better as well. That's the rumor. No. Okay.
I've never done it, so I wouldn't know. I wouldn't actually know how to begin trying to break into it.
It definitely does. My sister-in-law, Amanda Connor, she has done storyboarding for commercials and other things. It definitely pays much better. But like everything, it's evolving. And it's like how do you get in? Well, you got to be in those circles or force your way in.
Yeah, I'm not in the right city for it right now. I live in Hereford, which is doesn't really have much of a film maker circle as such. London did. I lived there briefly, but I never really got in that circle, so never happened for me.
So you were talking about like young artists who started making comics early, and I remember when I must have been a teenager, and I attempted to, I loved Savage Sword of Conan and the Conan Black and White magazine back in the day that Marvel put out. Fan of the character, fan of the magazine, and I was like, I want to do my own barbarian story, and I was like, okay, here's a stupid name. I'll go with rock and roll, and it'll be two barbarians. One would be rock, and one would be roll.
I quite like that. It already sounds like something out of Viz.
and I must have did like, I don't know, maybe a dozen pages. But it's like, oh my god, the artwork was so horrible. But like, I just kept working on it, and it's like, oh, it's getting worse. It's getting worse. It's like why I never finished an issue. But the experience was good though. The experience of actually doing it, and
yeah, there was that reminds me actually. There's a YouTube video game reviewer called Kadakaris, and he actually did these weird comic books when he was about 13 or 14. He actually read them on stream, saying how embarrassing they were, because he said for some reason when he was a kid he thought they were hilarious, but they never finished. So there's a story, some kind of like comic book about Toilet Duck or something like that. And he started in the second issue and never finished it apparently. So he has no idea how he even intended to finish it basically. But yeah, it was one of those things as a teenager he did. And say something else as well. Something else came to my head just as you were saying. Oh yeah, I sadly don't think I've got any of them anymore. But I actually storyboarded a load of some of the ideas I had as well. I at the time wasn't even into comic books, but my brother had this Making of Jurassic Park book that had some of the storyboards in the back. So I thought, oh, right, okay, I got these ideas for stories. I'll just do them like that. And I'm wondering if they kind of taught me something a fair bit that may still be with me now, so to speak. It's so even though I've obviously never printed them, they never will be published because I don't think they even exist anymore. They obviously must have helped me in some way down the line, I like to think. So, and I think at the time, actually, I even, when I was about 9 or 10, I actually saw, because my sister was going out with someone as well who was reading a Spawn comic book. I remember being intrigued by it. I wasn't really into comic books, but I definitely wanted to have a look at it myself when I saw it.
Right.
But I didn't start buying them at all until I was about 14 or 15. So it was about 5 years later before I actually even bought a comic book, basically. But still, yeah. So obviously there's some kind of draw to it. But so my actual first forays into sequential art, let's say, wasn't even in drawing comics at all. I had no intent of going into that medium either. But it's kind of all worked out like that.
But yeah, like you mentioned before, like these young kids, and they got a whole online presence and setup, and it's so professional looking, and even like some have little animations going, and it's like, man, if I was like their age now, and like I can't imagine. It's like there's so many advantages, and programs, and to help you do a bunch of stuff and get your work out there and promote it.
Yeah. Well, even then, though, it's kind of, there's always something you could do, though. I mean, even though the internet didn't exist particularly, I mean, it didn't really take off until I was probably 11, I don't think. I mean, I remember an age without the internet being around,
Yeah.
Even though I'm quite young, I actually still remember a time when there was no real internet around, particularly. But you could still hone your craft back then. That's more what I'm kind of getting at in a way, that I wish I'd at least done that. Although the trouble is, when you're young, you also can be a bit bashful. So you're kind of like, does anyone at my school really want to read this? You can kind of have that too.
Yeah, I know too many people who, like, so scared about showing off what they're doing that, the first remark that isn't like, it's amazing, they're like, oh, this isn't for me. I should, become a plumber.
Yeah.
It's like,
Well, I mean, I still don't really like showing my work, if I'm honest with you, but I do because I kind of think that, yeah, but this is what I want to do with myself, so I'm going to have to. It's never something that I don't get used. It's never something I entirely get used to.
yeah,
if that makes sense.
But that's okay. I mean, know that you will be uncomfortable or whatever. It's no big deal in the end of things,
Yeah.
I know, like, a number of people has spoken of sort of building a thick skin. I wouldn't call myself thick skin. I just, like, choose to, like,
ignore the
not
fear,
say
basically.
anything or ignore it or whatever. It's like, well, that's your opinion. You're entitled to it. You're wrong, but no.
I think I have to admit, actually, in a way, I almost feel worse when people tell me how good my work is because I don't know how to respond. I kind of, it's kind of mumbled thank you, but at the same time, you don't want to kind of just go, yes, I know, or anything like that. Or you don't want to go, but then again, so you can do that and then come across as arrogant, or you can be really modest and come across like, and then the trouble is they argue with you. So then you kind of say, oh, well, yeah, it's not too bad. And they kind of say, oh, no, it's really good. It's just like, what can I do? I'm kind of trapped all of a sudden that between this kind of thing of contradicting them, but you don't want to be arrogant and kind of, not that I am particularly arrogant about my own work. I know its flaws, as does any artist, pretty much. If you don't know your flaws as an artist, then you probably have an ego problem and need to be taken down a peg or two, maybe. But, at the same time, it's this kind of weird contrast. You kind of get a big ego about your art in the sense that you're probably better at it than a lot of people, especially at school, but you're still modest about it at the same time because you're modest to yourself because most artists are not happy with their own work.
Yeah. So. You're always developing, you're always growing, you're always, maybe learning new skills along the way and whatnot. I always felt that, living inside my own head while I'm working on art, that I really have to think I'm the next greatest thing out there. Otherwise, I'm not putting 100% into it.
Yeah.
So if I don't have an ego about it, at least to myself, then I'm not gonna try hard. I'm just gonna do work, which is way different.
Well, I do definitely put effort into my work. I mean, I do have the odd moment where I kind of say, "Oh, sod it, it's good enough." But at the same time, the trouble is, as well, your head's usually ahead of your own hand, basically, or your ability. So I realized with this. So originally, when I was kind of doing the panels for this book that I'm working on the minute, I had this image of these Jeff Darrow-esque street scenes and what have you. It's kind of like, yeah, but one thing is I'm not Jeff Darrow, and actually, at the moment, I'm not sure I've quite developed the patience to sit down and do those street scenes to quite the detail that he has. And I think, it's again building yourself up to it. Your head's ahead of your ability. I'm not saying I couldn't do the street scenes if I wanted to and make them look decent and look good and enjoy doing them. But what I'm saying is, as well, it's a time thing as much as anything, and also you can kind of realize your limitations too heavily that maybe this is something you should have done in your sketchbook for a bit before you try and tackle it on a page, when you can get the same message across in something that's more simple and perhaps closer to your abilities for now, then work yourself up to that kind of really amazing street scene or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to let some. I think for this, I've let some room for ambition here and there. So I could maybe put on my camera in a second. Just trying. Oh, there we are. So I've let myself be ambitious with one thing, which is basically a aerial shot of Piccadilly Circus. So it's London. So so let's see what we can do. Right then. So there's me. Let me see if I can just turn this around. You're right. So how do you reverse this thing? I can't remember now.
I'm not.
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just do it like this. So there we go.
There you go. That works.
So yeah, I've allowed myself to be ambitious there, effectively.
I'm trying to make it bigger.
Can you see it properly?
How do I? I'm not sure how to make you. Let's see. If
don't worry about it. It did something this one, I think.
Did it?
But my TV's a bit delayed, so I have to kind of look at that while. That's fine. I think everyone can see it anyway. But yeah, so I've allowed myself some ambition to come out with that. So every now and again I can, but I think it's kind of. It's sort of trying to take lessons from different people. So occasionally you might find that it's a good idea as well to maybe let things go a bit quick-paced, whereas I don't know, maybe it's trying to squeeze more into a certain limitation as well. You realise I take up full pages with my work, then it sometimes can slow the pace in a quick-paced scene. So it's all so I've got this kind of semi-chase scene through the streets of Camden. And so it's a chase scene, so it's got to be urgent. It's got to be kind of quick. They've got to be pursuing each other. And doing full-page spreads while that's happening, the urgency risks being lost, I think.
Right.
Maybe. And I think it's just you don't want to overwhelm the viewer either. It's nice to have lots of detailed scenes, but there's a lesson from Tom McFarlane where he talks, for example, on that Stan Lee show he did, where he says a lot of newer artists will do things in several pages or panels where I can do them in one. And sometimes I think it pays for the pacing of the storytelling maybe to kind of try not to overwhelm the viewer, but also give yourself space in the pages so you can tell the full story so you don't run out, I guess. I mean, it's basically I'm making up things as I go. Randall Bishop here in Camden, it's hard to get anywhere quickly. Yes, it is. I know. So, still, I mean, you still want the urgency of a chase sequence all the same. So, yeah, it's. So I just wanted to kind of maybe not get too ahead of my ability, really, because I think you can risk being so ambitious. People can kind of tell your limitations too much too, and you build yourself up to where you want to go, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I like ambitious work. I like, I like a comic where I see the vision of the writer and the artist on the page, and if it fails half the time, that's okay, because they're trying to do something above the average comic, Hey, more people showed up.
Yeah, hi, Carl. Let me see. Have I met Randall Bishop? I can't remember. But hi anyway.
He's a friend of mine. We're doing a book together.
Is he?
Yeah.
All right. Yep. Is he British or is he American?
He's American.
Oh, right. Okay. This is because you mentioned Camden, so I mean the Camden in London, not the one in New York. Just so he knows. Oh, and hi, Wooly as well. Wooly's here.
Yeah. Welcome, everybody.
Yeah. But Have you ever been to London then, Randall? Let's see what he says.
I know he's been to Germany.
Okay. Yeah, I've never been further than France myself yet, but yeah, I love Camden visit. So you must have been, yeah. Okay. So maybe I should try and add in the detail. Then he can see if I managed to pick it up and get it right this time. So.
Well, one of the
Yeah.
things I love doing is just like thumbnails. Just like, you have an idea or you have a simple plot and you start thumbnailing it out, and you could try different combinations and different variations.
Yeah.
And it really affects the storytelling of everything. And it's just, if you want to be a comic artist, it's definitely something you should get into and explore.
Maybe I
because
should be a bit more ambitious then. It's
it
annoying
definitely
though that it's annoying though because a few years back I actually was only a bus ride from Camden as well. I could get there in about 10 or 15 minutes, and now it's about 3 hours away. So, but that's one thing that I kind of regret not doing it back then, because just basically get on a bus with a camera, take photos around the places you want to show, and you can do it, get away with it. But you do have Google Maps, and luckily I can remember the place, so I can kind of get around. And in my head, if I want to set something in my head in London, I can at least think of a place and just look it up on Google Maps and get the details I want. But it's not the same. You don't get exactly the angles you want or whatever.
True.
I mean, obviously, I think with comics, it's all about getting the vibe of a place, I guess. But it's nice when you can kind of get it that, this place is real. This place is real. I've decided to add to it. So, it's so this book is. I can't remember if I was setting it in 2030 or 2035, but it's the future, so we'll call it that. But it's within our lifetime, so probably it'll be about 10 years from now. But it can be quite fun getting a kind of city that's recognizable and then adding to it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I remember when DC Comics, they sort of modeled like an actual Gotham City, an actual metropolis, and they had all these architecture drawings of each city. And I think I think this story suffered a little bit because they were trying to keep with what they already constructed and not just have sort of an open, obscure city that looked a certain way.
Yeah, because I think with Spawn they allowed some kind of license with fantasy with that, didn't they? Because I'm pretty sure one of the panels someone said that's Akira, as in there's a panel that he used for the cityscape in Spawn as to kind of double up for New York, and it's actually a panel from Akira, pretty much, of the cityscape on that. Or I think there's also once or twice he's also used photos as well, because it wasn't really about creating accurate art as such. It's sort of just basically this looks cool, we'll stick it in. And I was reading about this actually. It's one thing I'm also hoping to avoid as well in my own work is not getting too convoluted, because I think because I was so interested in kind of getting characters to look a certain way, get a certain pose, and create big guns to look cool and all that kind of stuff. And it just said, well, what story will look cool this week? So I put this in, and suddenly I got to explain it. And I think that's the thing with if you do have a kind of foot in reality, really, if you can get a real city, I suppose there's at least that. But then again, it doesn't really matter if it's Gotham or Metropolis, because they are fictional. They don't exist anyway. So you can kind of allow yourself some license to make it up and just focus on the excitement. Whereas I think with London or New York or Paris or whatever, people kind of want to see things that they can kind of go, oh, look, I've been there. Or look, because that's one of the fun things about going about video games, for example, which they show But so you reconstruct the streets, you can kind of walk around them and say, "Oh yeah, I've been there for real." Or even films sometimes. It's fun watching a few films in these places and realize, "Oh, I've walked in those places too. I know that place."
Yeah, yeah. And I'm originally from New York. I'm living in Kentucky now, but I have this like a horror one shot that I started. Another one of those projects I put it on the side. I'll get to it. But the idea behind it is that there's like ghosts in different areas of New York, and I want to do sort of like a 50-50. Like I want to be inspired by what's actually in New York, get actual street corners or specific buildings or parks or what have you, and then just run with the rest with my imagination and whatever fits the story best.
Well, that's pretty much what I'm trying to do as well. It's just basically, I know a lot of if I feature interiors, probably a lot of the places that are interiors are not real. It's the same with certain kinds of places. I mean, you can get the streets of so part of it's also going to be set in Soho, and the idea is there's going to be stuff where they probably show inside gangster headquarters or whatever. Now, most of those buildings in Soho, I've not been inside them. So you got to allow yourself some kind of fantasy, basically. That part of the city doesn't really exist. That there's no places that big in the middle of Soho or whatever.
Right.
I think that's where I kind of allow myself some. I mean, comic books aren't supposed to be real. Either movies, actually, either. You'll find movies where they kind of say, "Well, we'll just walk down here," and now, about 2 minutes later, say they've been in East London, after a 2-minute walk, they're suddenly in West London. That happens, I mean, there's a film called Naked, for example. It's a British film. It's meant to be really realistic. It's social realist. Is part of the genre it's called. And that has scenes of the main character walking around London at night, and it happens with him. He'll be in one part of London, and he'll kind of turn a corner, and you recognise where he is, and you realise that's a completely different area. So even films that are meant to be social realist or realistic or whatever, even they kind of have that kind of liberty, or they're quite liberal about that kind of thing, about the realism of that. But if it's meant to entertain, then that's probably okay anyway. But it's quite fun getting real places and then adding to them as well. So I say, right, this is meant to be London in 10 years' time. What can I add to it to change it? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's used like to a certain extent with actual historical facts. Like, comic book artists and writers will go into history and take something and just twist it a little bit to fit their characters into sort of a historical event.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, Braveheart, they basically did that. For example, the Scots weren't wearing kilts into battle in the 13th century, for a start. That's one thing that they had some kind of like, and also pikes weren't used at this Battle of Stirling, but they just thought, well, whatever, we'll use them anyway. It looks good. It's good to have a hero come up with them rather than Robert Bruce or whatever who came with them help something like. So Battle of Stirling was late 1290s, 1296, I think. Battle of Bannockburn wasn't until 1314, and that was the first time we know of where pikes were used in battle. And that was about 13 years after 9 years, sorry, after William Wallace died. But it's good for the film, so we'll just use it. So yeah.
Yep.
So you just do that really. Braveheart's a fantasy at the end of the day, so and that comes up quite a lot really. In a lot of cinema, they just have fantasy with it. It helps the story, so we'll use it.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think a lot less people are, historically accurate now. It's like they just want to tell a good story, and this, you get the gist of it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, there's all sorts of things. I have to admit, I'm not really interested in what Hollywood's doing lately. There's maybe one or two films I'm interested to see the latest version of Dune. Maybe.
Yeah,
Even then, I'm not sure. I'm a little bit hesitant, but Villeneuve did a good job on the last Blade Runner, so I'll give it a shot at least. And there's a few, but generally, I think for me, one of the most when it comes to historical fiction, actually, one of the ones I enjoyed the most actually was Rob Roy, and that's based on fiction anyway. That's the book novel. I mean, Rob Roy was a real person, but the book itself, again, isn't real. No, there's a film. The film is based on Walter Scott's novel, and it's just entertaining fiction. So they probably made some license. Well, they had to actually, because there was apparently. So, have you ever seen it? The film?
I don't believe so. I could be wrong, but
Oh, okay. So basically, the reality. So there's a dispute between him and this landowner or lord, local lord, Marquis of Montrose. He was a real person. There was a real dispute between him and Rob Roy, and apparently it was settled. Now the film has to fictionalize this because we don't know what it was. We don't know what their dispute was. So in that respect, I think we can kind of get we can kind of make some license with that. But the point, I suppose, I don't know where I'm going with this really. I suppose it's just something that you have to create these flights of fantasy when it comes to entertainment, I guess. But at the same time, it's nice to have your work grounded too, and that's what's fun about taking in real places, really, and all that kind of thing. I sometimes can go off at a tangent and realize where am I going with this, which has just happened. But actually, real honest, but it means my head's active all the time. At least I'm always imaginative, which means I'm always coming with ideas, right?
yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned Dune. I read the books years ago. Loved the books. And I only saw the movie. I didn't see the I think it was sci-fi miniseries, whatever it was, Showtime maybe. But I hope they do it right.
So do I.
It's not an easy thing, to.
Have you ever seen the Jodorowsky's Dune documentary?
Yeah. It's been years, but
yeah, it just makes it. I just think of the. So he talks about seeing the David Lynch version of Dune, and he said the absolute relief he had when he saw it because he admired David Lynch as well, and he's just said basically. Apparently, he said I remember the film. He said he started laughing. Basically, he was so happy it was a complete failure. Because apparently, because he said basically, if anyone's going to get it right, it'll probably be David Lynch. No, apparently not. But I mean, David Lynch, for example, he's not really a science fiction director, is he?
No.
So, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't mind the other film, but for me, I saw it before I actually read the book, so maybe I'm able to separate it anyway. But some of it is ridiculous as well. It's entertaining enough, but just as you kind of wish a lot of this historical fiction was more like you would expect it to be if you know a little bit about the history, you kind of want Dune to be more like what you know the book to be after you've read the book.
Yeah.
Because I've read Dune as well now, so, I'm aware that, although having said that, Jodorowsky's Dune wouldn't have been like the book either. Because he basically took the characters and he just ran with them wherever he wanted with them, effectively.
Yeah.
Have you ever read Jodorowsky's books, actually, like The Inkel and Metabarons and all that?
I've read Inkel. I've read probably some of Metabarons.
Okay. Well, speaking of recycling ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that was Dune, so there's a lot of stuff from Dune that was used in those.
And wasn't Fifth Element like that?
Well,
Wouldn't have
Fifth,
been.
yeah, that wouldn't have existed without the Incal. To the point, I think he lost the case, but Jodorowsky actually took Luc Besson to court over that because he said it's too similar to the Incal, and he wanted to get paid for it basically because he felt that. I think he lost basically because one of the people who also took Besson to court was Mobius as well.
Right.
And Mobius worked on the Fifth Element. So the court basically threw it out and said, well, if you knew it was a rip-off of the Incal, I think that was basically what they kind of came at him with. If you knew it was ripping off the Incal, why didn't you say something sooner? Surely you must have been
Right.
aware it was ripping it off if you were working on it. So I think they lost the case on that basis was because Mobius worked on the Fifth Element effectively. So they couldn't really. So the court ruled in Luc Besson's favour, which is fine with me. I don't think it's so similar. I don't think it's so similar to the Incal that it can. It's obviously derived from it, but so what? That's what a lot of films are. I don't think personally Jodorowsky has a case in that. Honestly,
Yeah, it's tough. It's it's like
what's
it's
it?
like we like the same things, but we made different things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I'm sure Besson was into it, as in the Incal. I'm sure because he did probably hire Mobius on the strength of that book, but I'm not convinced that he was just basically ripping it off. If I'm honest,
Right.
But yeah, it's a great film, and it still captures the vibe of those books anyway. So yeah. There's a really nice documentary actually up on YouTube. It's only about 20 minutes long, and it's Mobius and Mézières, and they basically talk about working on the Fifth Element themselves, and that's just really worth a watch too. Mézières,
Cool.
are you familiar? Have you seen any of Mézières' work?
Name something.
Valerian.
Yeah, I've seen Valerian.
Yeah, that's Mézières. So he's a pretty amazing artist as well, who I'm very fond of. But I think he uses watercolors in his work, or at least it looks like it anyway. And it's quite nice looking at this stuff, actually, looking at it with that format, because there is again, it's this really technological, futuristic stuff, but it feels organic again. And yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So we've been going over an hour. Do you want to share anything of your work that's online, or do you want to get into that? Maybe.
Yes, I can do. Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea, actually. So I currently have a zine/comic out at the moment that's not available through crowdfunding. The best way to get it is to contact me directly, either on Twitter, where you can find me at Michael Hing 8. If you just search that, you should find me. I think it comes in Twitter as Michael Hing Art, and I'll just get it out quickly so you can see what it is. So this is more or less self-produced as a kind of fanzine. Basically took it to a photocopy store. So let's get the camera on, turn it on. So this is it, and it's called Troubleshooter. It's the pilot edition. So there we go. Just get a first shot there. Show you the first page. And if you message me on Twitter, then I still have a few copies available. You can also find me on Instagram at, let's get this camera off, Michael Hing Art. You should find me on that. And you can message me there as well. Again, still got copies available. So those are the two best places to find me. I should, all being well, be launching a crowdfund on Indiegogo, I expect. It's the main one. It's a good site, by the things. So I'll be releasing a proper full issue of Troubleshooter there in the coming months. I can't really say when because I'd like to get it a bit more finished before they make that announcement. Just getting myself out there. And if nothing else, you can follow me on Twitter or on Instagram. And on Instagram, I usually post anything from daily to every other day. So you'll no doubt be able to keep up with my crowdfund when that comes available, as well as possibly one or two self-released fanzine pieces in between while I'm working on getting this one finished as well.
Cool. I should mention that I'm doing a pinup for the next book that Tonic Mole is producing. That's Saving the World Book 3, I guess. It's hard to keep track of everybody. But yeah, so I started sketching, so I got to get that done and get that to him. But that's currently live on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. Just type in Tonic Mole. You should find his current campaigns. I had some really good news on a project that I was worried that might be dead, but I can't really talk about it because it's probably not going to happen for a couple months. But just know that, I got some good news out of the blue. And that was awesome. Yeah, I'm just keeping busy on retro. Keep moving forward on a graphic novel I'm working on, and Randy, who's in the chat, I'm doing a Hawk of New York. I'm inking that. That's his creator-owned project. We're working on issue 7. And yeah, I mean, thanks for everybody who showed up and commented and checked out the stream. Please give the video a like, subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you to my new subscribers. And any last words?
No, nothing I can think of. I think I've said all I need to say. Been very good talking to you. Enjoyed myself a lot. Hopefully it's been a productive conversation. I hope I'm still quite new to this whole thing, so forgive me if I kind of still trail off a little bit. I will probably get better too about doing this kind of thing soon. So bear with me. Book's out soon. As I said, still got last book still available. So yeah, get in touch if you want one.
Cool. Yeah. No worries. I've been doing this for years, and I trail off. So yeah. Thanks for coming on. This was fun.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Bye.